All right, Jason, and you can share your screen.
Okay. Hopefully you can see.
Yep.
Yep.
Using the traditional PowerPoint instead of slides today. So let me just remember how to present here. Okay. So yeah,
Let me get
go ahead.
one thing in here real quick before you get started.
Yeah.
Just want to introduce Jason to everyone. So welcome, Jason. Thank you again for volunteering to give this presentation today. I'll let you introduce yourself in a second, but thank you, Courtney, for setting up the Zoom and getting live captions set up. That is super helpful. And a quick shout out to DQ Systems for sponsoring the event. That's also very helpful. If people don't know about DQ Systems, please check us out. We have great resources for accessibility, both testing and just learning about accessibility from DQ University. That's it. Take it away, Jason.
Thanks, Michael. Yeah, I'd been to a couple webinars for DQ, so if you don't know about them, I enjoyed those thoroughly. For anyone, if they're interested in accessibility or learning more, those were great. So yeah, thanks for having me, guys. I've been meaning to get down to an event in person to kind of just meet all of you today on the call and others that might be there. And this year has just been so busy, and I haven't made it. And then COVID-19 happened, and Michael and Courtney reached out, and obviously now in this kind of remote virtual state, it's probably a good time just to kind of update the group on University of Nebraska's efforts. And Michael's familiar with that with his work at UNL before working at DQ. So I think it's good to kind of update the group on the university system and what we're trying to do with accessibility and kind of where we're at. So I'll try not to bore you guys. And Courtney, Michael, if stuff pops in or people have questions, I feel free to interrupt, or we can just talk at the end, kind of open and informally. So who am I? I'm Jason Buzzell. I went to UNO in Omaha way back when. I can't believe it's been 20 years ago now. I also have a Master of Arts in Communication Technology from the University of Alberta. So if you follow me on Twitter or whatnot, you'll see a lot of Canadian references, and I kind of consider Edmonton my home. I guess 10 plus years in higher ed. Worked at Creighton briefly, and then the University of Alberta, where I got my master's degree. The slide's a little outdated. I was working at UNO as their digital communications director, so working on a similar team that Michael was on at UNL. I was the director at UNO. Did that for a few years. Also worked at some other places along the way, including down in Bellevue at the Bellevue Leader and the Alberta Motor Association. So lots of different background on web and web content. Like I said, I'm Canadian, so I also reffed a lot of hockey back in the day, and I'm a fan of Letterkenny. Usually when I'm in person, I'll say, does anybody know what Letterkenny is? If you want to know me better and you watch Letterkenny, that's basically my childhood in junior high and high school, rural Alberta, dialing in on dial-up and learning about the World Wide Web in the late 90s and early 2000s. So these were some of my websites way back in the day. Some of you, if you're doing developing or as old as I am, maybe remember creating sites like this that you can laugh about them now. I pulled these off the web archive. But learning the basic things like H1s and href, the inline font styles that are no-nos nowadays before CSS came. So kind of a lot of self-taught HTML, and when the CSS was changing and getting better and better, and designers were becoming really good designers, that's where I kind of moved over more to the content side, and really got interested in search. So my master's thesis is in search engine optimization, looking at how content impacts search and how search interest, in this case it was football. Not a big Huskers fan, but I am a big fan of this Canadian Football League and the Edmonton Eskimos. So I was always curious about how people were accessing information related to football, especially in Canada, and why they're interested in the NFL. So big interest in web content, and that if you think back, and if there's a couple of you on here who remember, Courtney, we were talking about a few years ago when you were working and doing programming and whatnot in higher ed, like those basic things that we learned way back when it came to web content are now kind of really important when it comes to accessibility. So that's my background, is more on the content side. And, I think there's a nice overlap, especially with everything going mobile web, responsive design, web apps, that's really important to remember those basics that we learned back in the 90s and early 2000s. And that's my background. Before I kind of dive into the areas of accessibility that we're really advancing at the University of Nebraska, I won't bore you here with an org chart, but it is important to kind of understand our IT organization. So 2 or 3 years ago, University of Nebraska used to have 4 or even really 5 distinct IT units. So there's one for kind of the Central University of Nebraska, then UNL, UNO, UNK, and UNMC all had separate teams. There was things we worked on together, but we definitely didn't work as one unit. So 2 or 3 years ago, they really came together, and this is before I joined the IT team. I was still at UNO, but they divided into a few core areas. So things like infrastructure, security, client services, this right-hand side, those are all central groups that aren't tied to any one campus. So you think our networking team, some of the big Wi-Fi, EduRoam type things, our security team looking out for us, monitoring phishing attacks. That's something that they can do centrally for all 3 campuses. And then the Med Center acts a little differently and a little separate. But at UNK, UNL, UNO, we have a lot of the shared services within those 3 core groups. On the left here, all of our campus groups still have a really strong campus presence. So Michael, you would have been kind of on an indirect team that was very closely tied to the UNL group and their UCOM group. We have that same structure at UNO and UNK as well. So we maintain a really strong campus structure. And have a CIO that's tied to the campus. So we always remember what's going on campus and remember that those unique needs at each of those 3 campuses. I kind of sit over here in a central role under IT strategy under Assistant Vice President Jackie Lindberg. So she's been a really strong advocate among many other people. Bob Chrysler at UNL, Jeremy Sidek at UNL, and Jackie in her kind of dual role at UNO and then Central. To really promote accessibility, and that accessibility isn't just web accessibility. There's a lot of pieces that IT we really want to bake into the organization. So she advocated for my position to be created nearly 1.5 years ago. And through this kind of merging of a group, we were able to establish a position that's focused on, kind of a coordinator position, a herding of cats within University of Nebraska IT that's focused on accessibility. So today I'm going to kind of give you a real quick update on so I started in August, and what is it now? I'm losing track. It's May. So we're 9 months in to this journey. And Michael kind of knows about bits and pieces of this. So I'm really curious to kind of his feedback and what he saw too when we in IT hadn't even really established my position, and he was helping a lot with different pieces of this. And so this was a slide I had for more internally, but we kind of went out to the groups within the different campuses and said, they were asking, how can we help? How can we get involved? And one of the things we wanted to do that we've done on security is we've kind of said, really, security is everyone's job. Everyone can advocate, make sure, we're doing best practices in security. And so we've really mirrored a lot of that cultural things that we've done in security around training and getting everyone involved in saying accessibility. It can be pretty much everyone's job as well. They can look out, they can have empathy when they're designing, they can think about accessibility as a requirement and not just a nice to have, things like that. So this presentation is kind of a morph off of that internal presentation where I was kind of pitching to them early on to get involved on their different apps or tools that they've built, or if they have a vendor of choice that they work with, how they could get involved. We also have Michael, I don't know how familiar you were with this or worked closely with this, but when I started in August, this Big Ten Academic Alliance, and if you go out to the btaa.org, all of the Big Ten partners, so UNL just doesn't play football. They also actually, we were competitors on the football and volleyball court and fields, but we actually come together a lot on academic things, including IT infrastructure. So there was a lot of knowledge sharing and different pieces that were shared by real leaders in the higher ed space around accessibility. So folks at Ohio State, Minnesota, Penn State, different pieces, we're all kind of leaders at different elements of accessibility. Some are really advanced on the policy front, some are really advanced on the procurement front. And they had come up with a way, it was really hard for me at the beginning. We were asked to come up with metrics. How are you going to measure success, and how are you going to show, growth over time within your accessibility? The Big Ten has kind of this maturity matrix model for me to kind of use and manage. And on the right there, the 1 through 5: initial, managed, defined, repeatable, and then the fully mature model would be optimized. They have a bunch of standards, and I won't get too deep into it, but they had a nice structure there for me when I started to kind of measure where we were at when I started in August, and then 9 months later, where are we kind of at within a bunch of buckets. And they have 6, and this is what I'm going to kind of get into today. Within each of these 6 priority areas, you can kind of measure where you're at. Are you kind of at the initial stage? Are you starting to manage your accessibility within a policy, for example? Have you defined the policy? Is it published? Et cetera. So I really, this was really helpful that some other folks, and those of you who are advocating for maybe within your organization, whether it be small or big, look outside within peer groups, or if you want to talk to me about this model and how I measured it, I'd be happy to offline or follow-ups kind of explain how I kind of measured this and tracked our progress so far. So one of the 6 areas, and I won't go too deep in all these, we'll just kind of rifle through them. The first priority area was kind of around policy and governance. So obviously the University of Nebraska, there had been somewhat, like, I think 3 or 4 multiple kind of attempts at just finalizing the policy and getting it over the finish line. And every time we were so close, there was just always some little wrinkle that stopped us from just publishing it. So I'm really excited. It sounds so simple, but Courtney, I know you work at Gallup, and there's just these big places. University of Nebraska is a big place, 50,000 students, thousands of faculty and staff, and lots of different priorities. So there was a policy there that we just had to polish off and get through the processes over the last 9 months, and really excited in July to get that policy published. And I can share the link with you guys after to the draft policy. But WCAG 2.1, it outlines some of our IT risk mitigation processes, action plan when it comes to equal effective action plans, how to create them, and then the documentation we require from vendors if something isn't inaccessible, and when they're going to complete the fixes by. So I'm really excited about that. I know it's kind of, some people like policy yawn, but that was kind of a big first step, is making sure we got that policy. That terrific work done way before my time by a lot of good folks at UNL especially, and Central. So I'm happy that that's getting completed, and kind of the first step of a few. And then obviously then it gets, enforcing the policy and getting folks the outreach and communication around it is the bigger challenge. A big piece of that policy talks a lot about our vendors. So before we started recording, we were talking about different vendors, maybe for video or courses or captioning. The policy kind of lays out the process for purchasing and how we make sure that the vendors we choose are inclusive and, make accessibility a priority. So we do security reviews, and we also do accessibility reviews. We do more than just, looks kind of an incomplete slide here, but the VPAT is kind of the first step, and there's multiple steps, a questionnaire, manual testing that take place, and really defining this process, educating others on this process, and then baking that into the culture beyond just IT, but also our procurement, our colleges, our business officers, so that we start selecting tools that really make accessibility a priority. So This was kind of priority number 2 for us. It's coming along. There's, we're working with 3 plus the Med Center on this process, and the expertise around accessibility is still emerging, especially in higher ed. So we're doing a lot of training and outreach over the next year to get folks up to speed on how to test vendors and how to judge accessibility and come up with a plan for those that maybe have some inaccessible issues identified. This was a big advocate for transit. It's a hard time for public transit. This is kind of a look at a transit map. I think this was more at University of Nebraska Omaha of some of the tools that we use. So those of you who are passionate about usability and that user experience, you can see, how jarring it could be for a user that maybe has to jump from a website to a registration form, maybe to an internal tool to check out or whatnot. And each of those has different, design standards and some accessibility issues as you're jumping. So I always make the case, if we can make that transition from each stop as smooth as possible, if we can have an elevator that's quick and fast and to use a metaphor, quick and fast up to the next stop and get you on the next train without you even noticing, that's what we're looking for kind of when we're, we can't avoid some of these being vendor tools. Sometimes we're able to build, a solution for forms or checkouts or whatnot, but a lot of times we have to work with vendors, and that's coming up with an accessibility plan for each of them. Before COVID-19 broke out, we were really focused a lot on identifying, printing stations, identifying different tools, whether it be free or things like Zoom Text and JAWS that are out there in our public labs. Obviously, that has the priority changed a lot to our online learning over the last 5 or 6 weeks as we've shifted to fully remote a few weeks ago, and we'll be doing a bit of a hybrid over looking into the fall. But this hasn't fallen off. We're looking at all those tools that are used and maybe standardizing a few and making sure they're publicly available at different labs on campus. So that's another priority area that's been a little bit sidetracked, especially when we're not on campus right now, but still important. We have a lot of labs on campuses that have JAWS and Zoom Text, and the accessibility offices take the lead on where that's designated and who gets access to that through their accommodation plans. And there's some good work there. Like we said, identifying laptops and doing virtualized screens out to multiple labs on campus where we can continue to grow the access to those tools that those using assistive technology may need. So that's on the agenda. And then this is one I'm really excited now that we have the policy in place this summer, and really getting out, especially during this transition to remote learning, is getting out and doing a lot of, I don't want to call it training, it's a lot of outreach as well. So we've had we've been really forced to get faculty up to speed on accessibility when it comes to remote learning. So from an institutional perspective, trying to get some mandatory training in place and track that, especially for staff and at least new faculty, and then getting existing faculty on board. Canvas courses, we're doing tons of course design reviews for remote teaching and online learning, not just for classes that are, have a student with disabilities, but everyone. A lot of different Canvas courses are getting upgraded right now. And then our web authors, a lot of just like faculty within our learning management system, we have web authors out in our CMS, our content management system. So working with the different campuses on some training there, little things like alt tags and headings, and don't use inline CMS, things that just, you can have a perfectly accessible CMS product and then a web author can go make a mess of it. So some training and professional development over the next year or two there, and baking that into the institution and how we track all other trainings, that it's mandatory not just to get, Title IX and ADA training, but also, especially if you're going to be doing courses or maintaining a website, that you get this training, because it's just as important. There's inaccessible content out there publicly facing that's just as dangerous and a barrier to folks as course content at times. Some of the things that are more on the long-term agenda is baking in some of our HR hiring practices. And so, if we're hiring within ITS to start if we're hiring developers and designers, that they understand accessibility, they take it seriously, that we hired for a diverse audience. And so those are things that we're continually working on. They've done the HR department within our IT organization has done a great job of totally revamping our hiring process to really be inclusive, and that was predated me, but continuing to work with them. We've also made some more technical changes within our timesheet tool that we use to, it's called Firefly. We had a blind user discover a couple issues, and we got those fixed. Those are kind of little stories that I love. More testing down the road. What we want to do, get an inventory of all of our learning technology tools, and just continue to work on those hiring values so that we continue to hire people that care about accessibility, or those that may, have blindness or use assistive technology. They can join our team, and that's how you can really meet and have an inclusive workforce and meet the goals of accessibility and affordability at the University of Nebraska. So the sixth area, this is one Michael is totally aware of, and I really lean on the campus-based teams for this area. I think a lot of us, and even me included, think about accessibility within web and mobile design first, but with all those other priority areas around course content and training and the policy and procurement, this one I really lean on our leads at the campus. So we made a ton of campus-based enhancements. They never end, as Michael knows. More testing, more auditing, more training is on the agenda for those front-facing web pieces, and then some of our mobile apps and different vendors that might be creating mobile apps, making sure they understand WCAG 2.1 and that they meet those standards if we choose them, or if we have developers building stuff that they meet those for the things we're building. So not to gloss over that, but a huge area when we talk about within our IT organization, kind of supporting 4 different web properties: Nebraska.edu, UNK, UNL.edu, and UNOmaha.edu. Thousands and thousands of pages that we need to continue to audit, inventory, fix, train our web authors. So never-ending work there for sure. Seventh area that the Big Ten really hasn't identified, but I think for us, we've kind of identified as, and I kind of hinted on it, but our learning technology. So we're getting a task force together to do an inventory of all of our tools that plug into our learning management system. So things like Zoom, things like VidGrid, I think I mentioned, and a few other tools. Really getting an audit of those, getting with the vendors. A couple examples: Duo, it's a 2-factor authentication service. Getting with them to identify some accessibility issues, getting that on their roadmap, and getting fixes. And so that to me is another. I'm really excited about working with vendors that we already have existing relationships with, and if they either don't know about it, making them aware of some issues through user testing, getting them on their roadmaps, or if they are aware of it, prioritizing and using the power of multiple schools within our system, or the Big Ten, or even some bigger consortiums that we're with, to put some pressure on these groups to fix some issues. And there's been some really good big success stories out of that, with working together within the Big Ten, or even just within the University of Nebraska system to ask vendors to get things done. So the matrix of top tools and integrations and accessibility, kind of a status update review of where we're at with each, and getting out there and pounding the pavement with each of those vendors. So I just kind of end with, I think all of you, may have, if you've been around for a little while, you think IT and communications and the web and marketing, they've always been kind of sometimes siloed. And I think accessibility is kind of a good piece. And we've had some success over the 9 months where it's, this Wayne over here on the right says, "Not my farm, not my pig," right? Like, not my problem. That's an IT thing, or that's a communications thing. We've really gotten through that now, and we're trying to work together, and both on the content side, the training side, IT, communications, a few other partners within academic affairs and whatnot. We're trying to work together, and I think accessibility is one of a few areas that's really shown you can't work in silos. You have to work together. So I'm excited about that. On the left was an example of, I was following off the bus. I take the bus a lot around Omaha when I can. There was a blind person who was walking. He's on the left there on the sidewalk, and a little farther up, someone hadn't shoveled their sidewalk, a business hadn't, and he veered out into the road. And so I was about to go grab him, and somehow he kind of, with his walking stick, ended up realizing he was out in the road and jumped back onto the sidewalk. And I always use that kind of example as, something as small as a little bit of snow on the sidewalk, for someone who's blind. If you think of your website, something as small as, a button that is inaccessible or you can't reach it by keyboard, totally inaccessible to someone, trying to use their keyboard who's blind. Something as small as the snow almost, could have been a catastrophe for this person who is blind over on the sidewalk. And by shoveling the sidewalk, you're not only making it safer for him, you're making it, easy for me as well, who had to trample over the snow, and it was icy and hard. So I always use that kind of metaphor, those two metaphors with that. This is my good friend Mark Bulger. He sat on with me a couple boards in Omaha. I think he's still the president of the Association for the Blind. He has this great phrase, what's good for the blind is good for everyone. And I think that story that I told you about the snow kind of encapsulates that. So I've kind of rambled on. I can't see you guys, so I hope you've gotten a little nugget out of this and we can have a nice discussion. If you have any questions, I'm happy to take them. And yeah,